Cleveland? It's time to turn up the conversation. Tune in to the Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell radio show. What's on your mind Tuesdays? Call in, comment, and connect on WOVU 95 FM, WOVU.org, and hit us up on social media. Let's go.
I won't be foolish, no.
What's up, Cleveland? It's time to turn up the conversation. Tune in to the Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell radio show. What's on your mind Tuesdays? Call in, comment, and connect on WOVU 95 FM, WOVU.org, and hit us up on social media. Let's go.
And I'm letting them know. Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell radio show. Real talk, authentic trust. You don't want to miss it.
What's up, Cleveland? It's time to turn up the conversation. Tune in to the Strategic Educational. This is major. Special guests on talking plenty movers and shakers. Cleveland in the house. WOVU 95 FM, WOVU.org, and hit us up on social media. Let's go.
And right now, this is what you need. It is hosted by Kenn Dowell, art, politics, and culture. So let's go. Strategic.
What's up, Cleveland? It's time to turn up the conversation. Tune in to the Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell radio show. What's on your mind Tuesdays? Call in, comment, and connect on WOVU 95 FM, WOVU.org, and hit us up on social media. Let's go.
And 95.9 FM. And don't just listen, jump in and be the conversation. Let's go.
What's up, Cleveland?
Hey, what's up, everybody? You tuned in to another episode of Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell and Dr. Heather E. Burton. And we're here today. Oh, you got to do that again. Dr. Heather E. Burton. You got to give her, she got to get her. There we go.
There we go.
Doctor got to get her claps in, man. She came in here again, helping us out on our great day today. We having a fun program today. I got a lot on my mind today. I didn't know what I wanted to talk about today until I got halfway here. And I was working on a show that I wanted us to talk about today. And I got it halfway together and sent some notes over to you. But on my way coming in this morning, I kind of woke up with this on my mind and want to talk about that as well. So one of the things we're going to talk about, there's a few things that's on the agenda today. One is we're going to talk about the sudden death of Malcolm-Jamal Warner. Into our community. Everybody know that was Theo growing up on the Huxtables and all of that. I mean, people watched that and we watched that young man grow right along with us. He was about 2 or 3 years younger than I was. So we all watched each other grow through that process and that family and him grow into a nice young man, an actor, activist as well, had a podcast he was doing, a lot of great things out here. And a sudden death. He drowned on a vacation or out with some friends doing some things out, and that suddenly happened to our community. That's a sudden death that really shocked everybody. What did you hear about that, Doc?
So several things, but yeah, he was in Costa Rica.
Yeah,
so
that's where it was, Costa Rica.
Malcolm-Jamal Warner was in Costa Rica on a family vacation. And he drowned. The reports are coming out that it was a big wave that hit him, as well as another person. So there was somebody else who has not been identified that's in critical condition. Wow. I think they were like 35 years old. That's what I read this morning. But yeah, and I think, when you look out the outpouring on social media and others in regards to Malcolm-Jamal Warner, we grew up on him.
That's correct.
That was the Cosby Show. That was Theo with his Gordon Gartrell shirt. Everybody remember the Gordon Gartrell shirt. Exactly. If you don't remember nothing else, you remember that Gordon Gartrell shirt that Denise promised.
That's correct.
was going to be an original. Yes. And he came up with a half a sleeve short. Yeah. It was button opposite. The buttons was wrong.
Exactly.
So you remember just Theo. And then he went on to do great work.
Great work
Really outside of that with his, many accolades. I remember more recently seeing him in 911, Angela Bassett's show.
Yes.
Where he played someone who had come, his family has come to a fire.
Yes.
And he was seeking revenge, but then kind of it shifted and changed. But, just seeing the great work that he did on The Resident, Malcolm and Eddie, that comedic plus the serious. And then I think he had more recently a podcast.
Yes, he did. He had a podcast.
That I hadn't listened to. And every time I think of the Cosby Show, y'all remember all I can think about is the song, It Was a Right Time. Ray Charles song, and they came down, they mixed it all together, and it was like, baby. So that's all I think about. But yeah, just the greatness. But you know what's interesting, Ken? I think is how many people are dying under 50, and we'll just say 60 because he was like 54?
Yeah, 54.
But just losing life at young ages. And I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day, and we were just talking about how it seems that, I don't know if it is because of media attention, I don't know if it's because of social media, but you hear so many deaths of people being young.
Yeah. Well, you're just hearing a lot more of it because of social media. It's getting to you a lot quicker. You're finding out it's more in your face. It's like the lost people, lost kids, lost folks, on social media. I got a thing where every time I see a kid that's missing, I call them lost. Sorry about that. Missing, the missing children and missing people. When I see that, I'll share it. You never know. Just share it. I automatically just share it. But I made that a thing that I was doing, but it dawned on me how much of that I was sharing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like, God, it seemed like I was constantly just, and it reminded me just how many people are missing. So the same thing too, social media is that two-edged sword where you ask for it, you got it, and you get it in all kinds of ways. And that's one of the things that, fortunately, you get information from there. And part of that information, there was some backlash with Bill Cosby and others who may have came out and giving their support to Malcolm, and people still not feeling them and having some backlash on that. So again, that's social media playing into it, that you can't even be sincere about something. I would imagine Bill Cosby had some sincerity about anything he helped raise that guy to some degree, relate that, and he even getting smacked around on social media about that,
And and like you said, he had a relationship.
Yeah.
So we can't minimize that there was a relationship between Bill Cosby and Malcolm-Jamal Warner, because even in any of the cast on the Cosby Show, because they were young when they started on these shows. So there is relationship that exists. And I think, social media, that's a whole nother show. We could do a whole show on social media and just the comments that people make.
Yeah.
And the insensitivity that people make. I look at things, and some stuff I have to stop reading the comments.
Right.
Because a friend of mine, her niece was killed. Was it last week? When was I in DC? Last week?
Last week it was here. The week before.
The week before.
Yeah.
See, my days are getting confusing now. But her niece was killed. And I think, some of the comments that I read around that and other stuff, it's just the insensitivity that we have. And I always tell people, until you experience something, keep your mouth closed.
Right.
Just keep your mouth closed, because you don't know unless you've been there or you've been through it. And even then, your lived experience won't be the same as somebody else's.
Somebody else's. Correct. That's what made me come to, again, I was trying to figure out the last few days about what I would really talk about and what we should try to really bring a show around. And then this morning I woke up and I guess I can honestly say that for the first time, I didn't know what I really wanted to deal with. And as you ministers and pastors would say, somebody spoke to you and actually gave you something you wanted to talk about. I experienced that today. I actually did.
It happens.
It happens
where we hear from the Spirit, and the Spirit puts something on us, and we just got to talk about it.
So today I want to talk a little bit, and we're going to talk about some of this other stuff. But the thing that came on, I was talking to Pastor Phillips coming in also.
Oh, no.
Yeah, there it is. That's enough to get you going, right? We doing our morning talk, and he the one who kind of helped me, guided me down this thing that helped me do it, because we were just talking. And actually, Unicorn, I was listening to you guys this morning also with Rabbi, and you guys, we was talking about, he was talking about the churches in the community and how many churches was in an area and how they there, but it's no connection. Then I was thinking about that, to just how Phillips was talking about how he's working on some things and there's no connection there. I woke up a little bit on some things on my mind personally that I'm dealing with. And it was just like, it seemed like I'm having a hard time communicating. As much as people say we got to communicate, and communication is the key, you got to communicate, but it seems like I'm having a hard time communicating. So the thing that was on my mind that got is that how we are so connected, but it seemed like we are just so disconnected from everything. And when I say that disconnect is not just with Rachel. Retrograde. I can't see you. You got it. And you got the mic. You got you good. So my thing was that it was that we so connected, but we're disconnected, and not just in politics, not in just community, not just in churches, but even in your family life. How you have, sometimes I feel I'm not connecting with my kids as much as I want to connect with them. It seems like as much as I try to speak with them, they're not hearing it. Or if I hear it, it comes off a different way. Not just with my kids, it can be other people in this world we deal with. Everybody's so hypersensitive that if you say something to some people, call yourself communicating with them. Then if you say something that may trigger them, that they fall into a mass depression, that they, so why you say that to me, and they hold your words against you, that you can't communicate, so you feel like you don't want to talk no more. And I'm at a point where I don't want to talk no more. I'm tired of talking. I'm tired of telling people what they should already be knowing they should be doing. And that was my thing this morning, Dr. Burton. I was just like, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm just so fed up with everything. I was looking at trying to find something to talk about. I look and I see a thing where President Trump has now said he want to change the name of the Redskins the name of the Commanders back to the Redskins. Yeah. I'm just like, man, nothing is sacred anymore. Nothing. And I don't have a problem with that, but it's like, man, how come we dealing with that instead of dealing with some of the real issues? But here's the problem. I get in the comments because I want to know what people saying. They all agree with it. It's like thousands of comments of people straight up agreeing with them. So I'm just so full of the BS that I just don't have nothing to say. And so I said, I'm going to let the doctor talk today, because I don't know what to deal with this. I'm fed up. I don't know what I can say to anybody to make them get more inspired about doing anything. I don't know what you can tell anybody anymore to tell them how important EI was for our country and how we screwed that up. I don't know what we can tell anybody anymore about doing any of the things to make life better. So you need to help me out today.
Well, that was a lot, wasn't it, Uni? That was a whole lot within that paragraph of your monologue. Yeah. But I think, Kim, there is so many things within that. And especially when you started talking about being connected, but so disconnected. I think very often what tends to happen is that we minimize the impact that history has had on us as a community, and what we keep trying to accomplish and what we keep trying to achieve. And so, and I'm going in many different directions because that's where you led me when it comes to communication and when it comes to different. And so when we think about within the community, and when we think about within our families, one thing that we have lost is we've lost that connection because we've lost the generational approach and the oral narratives and the stories that historically happened within the family. And so grandma used to pass the tradition down. We heard the stories. We knew what happened. We listened to that. We were sitting at the same dinner tables. Now, when kids get 18, even earlier that, they're leaving the house. And then when they leave the house, they create their own life and their own life. And so when they come back, the lived experience is so different that you now can't connect because there's been such a gap within that ability to communicate. And so, as kids, when we get grown, we think we know it. We think we've got it. And so now we've lost that oral history, that oral tradition that is usually or historically have been passed down. And a great example is dinner.
Right.
Think about when you grew up, I grew up, every Sunday we were at grandma's house.
That's correct.
every Sunday, the family, not just one or two people, but the family was at grandma's house and those conversations were being had. And so you created a connection that's no longer within our communities or within our families. So that's a problem all in itself. Then when we talk about teaching, is I have been in such a great mental place being out of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Really?
Because, and let me explain this on several levels. One is I never wanted to be in diversity, equity, and inclusion as a professional. And I say that because what tends to happen is just like the government did us. They lump us into one category and they think that that's your only skill, that your only skill is because I'm Black. The only thing I can do is help Black people. And when you deal with diversity, equity, and true diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals, you will see that the skills are so extensive that we can do program development, program management, program evaluation. We can do strategic leadership, strategic managing. We can work with faculty, staff, students, community organizing, everything, because our skills are so extensive. But when people see you as a diversity person, that's all they see you as.
That's correct.
And so then the expectation becomes every time you walk into a room, it's expectation that you're going to teach me. And you're going to talk to me about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
And so when I say the mental space of being out of there, is it has given me the opportunity to pull back mentally, that every day, 24/7, I don't have to teach somebody about what it means to be marginalized, what it means, or what strategies we need to be in place. So we, we're not engaging in biases. We're not engaging in microaggressions. And I remember my therapist had told me when I first started in my old role in 2020, that was with George Floyd and the pandemic. And in that, one of the things that was happening was everybody within the institution space and even surrounding was coming to me for advice and coming to me for, I need you to help me with this. Can you do this? Can you do that? Nobody asked me how I was dealing with anything.
Right.
Nobody said, how are you functioning in this space of dealing with police brutality, police abuse of power, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor? What's your mental space? Nobody asked me that, Ken. Nobody. And my therapist said to me, you've got to create some barriers because you're talking about this 24 hours, 7 days a week. And as I started reflecting, I was like, you're right. Because here was the thing. It wasn't only happening at work.
Right.
It was happening when I went to the family dinner. It was happening when I went to church. It was no matter where I went, somebody was talking about some aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion or Black people. So I started joking and saying that my therapist, well, that wasn't a joke. We also came up with this, but my therapist said I wasn't allowed to talk about Black people after Friday at 5:00 and before Monday morning at 8 a.m. And that's the so I understand the tiredness of teaching, and people don't change. Right. And you don't see the change. I was in this space trying to change hiring practices and change human behavior. And when you're trying to do that and people are not changing, and then here's the other thing, they say I'm committed. Right. They say I support, but when you look at the data and when you look at the numbers, nothing is changing. And I go to Trump. This is another example when you talk about even the Redskins and this idea of changing that. Why do we continue to communicate with people who don't have the capability to change and understand what it means to change?
That's my point.
I know. That's what I said.
Exactly.
I mean,
why do I continue to go through this madness?
But sometimes I say, and I've heard other people say this, is that it's who we communicate with and what audiences we're trying to reach. And so if we look at it from our individual lives and our individual perspective of communicating within our nucleus and the people that surround us, that's a different, yes, agreed, alignment is that we got Uni take writing notes down instead of just getting on the mic and saying something. So me and Ken over here deciphering words that she's putting on the sheet of paper. I write like I'm a doctor for real.
Right, and we try to
I'm like, alignment Yes, that's it. But yeah, and aligning our priorities and aligning who we talk to, because sometimes it's not even worth having conversations with folks who you know are not going to change. And it's so much in this, Ken, in this communication and these conversations, because talking to people on a regular basis, you sit and you listen to folks and you listen to their opinions and you listen to what they're saying. And they can be on a page that you just like, I don't even have time today. I don't have time to engage with you. I don't have time to deal with you. I'm thinking about a couple meetings that I have coming up that when I start dreading a meeting, because I know the direction, I'm in a place now, being unemployed, that I can pick and choose who I engage with. And I'm not letting anybody drain my space, which I think is also beneficial for in preparation of going back into the work environment, of putting boundaries in place of, if this is what you're doing and you're constantly pulling, but you're not here to really create change and change for the better, I just don't have the time.
That's kind of where I was at. I was just, it seemed like we're on this hamster wheel of it, and I just drew the line. I think this morning is where I just said I'm drawing the line. I'm just at a point where just can't do it no more, and that's for everything. That's dealing with the kids, that's dealing with the business, that's dealing with people. It's just that everybody's grown, everybody got decisions to make, and everybody's going to do their thing. I believe that everybody has to make their own decisions and everybody has to do it. Now, I'm not saying this because I got any hidden messages or talking to anybody. No, I'm just saying as a community, I think everybody has to step up and do what they need to do as a community. All this disconnect that we have with each other and we all want to say it's because we don't communicate and we need more communication and all of that kind of stuff. I think people are communicating.
But I think
people also ain't listening.
I agree with that, but I also think we have an expectation of what we need to do, that realizing no matter what era and what we're fighting for, it's never the masses.
Right.
When we think about people working within the organization, working within the church, it's usually the 10% of the organization, 10% of the church. Correct. And I think what's happening is we have this expectation that we want the 50 to 60 to 70% to do the work. But the reality is we've never gotten the 50 to 60 to 70% to do the work.
That's correct.
And that's when we have to stop pulling back. And that's why I said, because there are so many people out here who say what I would do, how I should do it, and what I can do, but you're not doing anything.
That's correct.
And so they're sitting in the background doing all the talking about what should be, but not doing anything. And I think that's where we, as people doing the work, as people looking to create change, I think we have to keep our expectations and not saying lower our expectations, but our expectations is who are the people that are truly committed and how do we push those masses?
All right, well, we're going to take a really quick break because when we come back, we're going to get back on program, y'all. That was my little rant this morning and how I was feeling. But we're going to get back on program because there's a few things that did come up that I wanted to talk about. We're going to get back to this Black assimilating. We had talked a little bit about that last week. We're going to talk a bit about Black women in leadership and that method. And the DEI, she headed on DEI a little bit already. But when we get back, we're going to talk about that. Plus, I got a big conversation. I want to talk about what our President Barack Obama has been saying lately. So we're going to get into that as soon as we get back.
Get ready, Cleveland. It's your turn to speak up. Call in and tell us what's on your mind. Join the Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell radio show on 95.9 FM WOVU. And connect live at WOVU.5 FM, WOVU.org, and hit us up on social media. Let's go.
Support for WOVU comes from RL Productions, presenting the Texas Floods fundraiser August 15th from 7 to 11 p.m. at the Mediterranean Party Center, featuring live performances by Lena Loy, Cubs Green, Tony the Bishop Simpkins, and The Real Empire, alongside hosts Ray Robinson and Ty Barber. Proceeds will benefit Texas flood relief efforts. For more information, call 216-862 24933.
All black, all the time. WOVU 95.9 FM, Cleveland's urban alternative.
Support for WOVU comes from the Phoebe Foundation, a Cleveland-based nonprofit that offers financial education and digital access programs. Since 2002, the foundation has provided resources for budgeting, credit, and home ownership. Programs include All Things Money and Wired to Work, which features workshops, one-on-one coaching, and youth-focused sessions. For more information, visit bbfoundation.org.
WOVU 95 FM, WOVU.org.
Support for WOVU comes from Village of Healing, a wonderful nonprofit health center led by Black women with locations in Euclid and Shaker Heights. Village of Healing offers services in gynecology, obstetrics, mental health, pediatrics, and primary care. The organization focuses on serving communities in Greater Cleveland. More information about them is available on the web at villageofhealingclv.com.
WOVU.org, and hit us up on social media. Let's go.
Hi, my name is Javon from Cleveland. Keep listening to WOVU 95.9 FM.
Support for WOVU 95.9 FM comes from Pitt Cuyahoga, working with community partners to promote healthier environments where residents can live, work, learn, and play. Pitt Cuyahoga connects individuals and neighborhoods with tools and resources for healthier living. Learn more at Pitt Cuyahoga. That's HIP Cuyahoga.org. Powered by the Center for Disease and Control and the Cuyahoga County Board of Health.
It's time to turn up the conversation.
Support for WOVU comes from the 100 Black Men of Greater Cleveland and the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists, presenting their second annual golf outing on Saturday, August 3rd from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Highland Golf Course, 3550 Green Road. The event brings together Cleveland athletes, journalists, and community figures to support scholarship opportunities for students. More information is available by emailing chairman at 100blackmen.org.
No radio, no problem. WOVU 95.9 FM is now on the iHeart app. Cleveland's urban alternative on the go.
It's time to turn up the conversation. Tune in to the Strategic Moves. What's up, Cleveland? Radio show. It's time to turn up Tuesdays. Tune in to the Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell and Dr. WOVU.org, and hit us up on social media.
Well, you know what? I am a grown man, you know, and I'm willing to listen.
Just like, where is this coming from?
You know, so Dr. Burton did something during the break, and I'm gonna let her repeat that because she talked about, which could be probably the issue that me and maybe some of the community is facing when we talk about communication. So go ahead when you talked about difference of communicating.
Yeah, what I was sharing during the break is that I think many of us feel that we're great communicators. And we also feel that when we come into the room, we're communicating. But there are skills to communication versus, and I use the example of myself, I'm a great talker. I can talk about A to Z. Mm-hmm. But in terms of communicating, especially when it's conflict and when it's disagreement, how well do we listen, hear each other, and deliver the message that we're trying to get across? Mm-hmm. But when there's conflict and disagreement, the first thing people do is they either shut down, they start talking over each other. Mm-hmm. And so that's not good communication skills. Mm-hmm. And so we can always come into a room, and when your organization is going to be defensive, right? Like the church is going to say, we communicate. The politician's going to say, we communicate. But when there is conflict, are we listening, hearing, and understanding each other? And so that's just, one of the things that talking about during the break of how we define communication and how we define what it really means to come together.
And that's why I say I'm a grown man, because I can admit to that. Right? I will admit to some things that I might be a better talker.
I mean, I admit to it. I admit to it.
Maybe I'm a good talker and I'm not communicating.
Because I shared during the break, when you get to me, I did that to Phillips the other week. I'm gonna shut down. Right. Like I'm not about to yell over you. Right. Except if I got to get a good point across, which I joke. I had to do the black girl clap on that conversation on that show. But I will shut down. Mm-hmm. And that's not a good form of communication when we talk about communication skills and what it really means to communicate.
So maybe we got a lot of people talking and ain't saying nothing. That's where that came from.
That's Sonic.
That's another thing.
That's what it is. They doing a whole lot of talking and ain't saying nothing. That make me feel bad. I call myself a talker. I'm talking all that stuff and ain't saying nothing. Ain't nobody following me. Ain't nobody listening.
Because the other thing with communication is, you may be a great talker, but are you reaching the audience that you're intended to reach when you are talking?
Man, it's so wrong. Well, this is what I'm gonna do, man. I'm gonna take this heat off of me, and I'm gonna put it on the next brother. We're gonna put this on President Barack Obama. He's in my hot seat today.
Oh, do not! I listened to this whole interview, so I'm gonna let you go into it.
And listen,
specifically,
I actually got one little spot on here I want to talk about, but I don't want this conversation for anybody to try to call yourself trying to cancel me or anything because of what I'm going to say. Let me put my disclaimer on there. No, don't give me that. No.
Okay.
No, I don't want, I know what you about. No, we're going to hold on to that.
Okay.
I want to talk about Obama was on his program, the IMO, which is Michelle Obama's podcast. She had a podcast she did last week, and he said a couple things. First, I'm going to go with this before we get into her show. He did something about the Democrats and as a whole. He said that they were whiny and they need to step it up. And he said, they're not being tough enough to deal with what's going on with the Republican Party and that kind of thing. Doc, what you think about Obama and his comments as it relates to Black politician and trying to get involved in that kind of thing? You think the Democratic Party has softened up, and do you think it leaves an opening for another party?
I'm using my constitutional rights, and I plead the fifth.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think people are just tired, and people are tired of politics, all levels of politics, not just from the federal government, but the federal, state, local, your family politics, as we just talked about earlier with the communication. And I think people are just tired, and people are looking for an answer, and we keep looking in one place for the answer. And the answer is not going to come in the Democrats, and the answer is not going to come in the Republicans. And so folks are saying, well, yeah, let's open the door for a third party. But the reality with that, too, is that now you got a third party, and the answer is not going to come in. Let me say this. The answer for everyone is not going to come in one party. Because first of all, when you're dealing with humans, you cannot find one right way. Now, that is a theoretical premises of my of public administration, which is my master's and PhD, is that, and that's the thing, is that that's the difference between business administration and public administration, is that when we're dealing with humans, there is no right way. And what we keep looking for is the right way. And we're not a business. The business right way mindset is bottom line, is what's affecting it financially. But when we talk about humans, how do we create policy? How do we create organization systems that are for one right way when we're talking about not a non-monolithic group of people? Even within our community, when we look at Black people, we all not one and not all the same. And so if I'm creating a policy that may help me, it may not help you, and it may not help Uni. But then we look at it and we're like, oh, but it helps the masses. But which masses?
Right.
And so I think this is the problem here. Now, do we need to fight? And do we need to fight this cult that's in the White House?
Yes.
Of course.
Right.
we do. Do I have the answer on how to fight this? Well, I do, but I can't say it publicly on the radio. Well, just kidding, Siri.
It won't be televised.
Right. The revolution will not be televised.
But that to what you're saying is one of the issues that's been going on as it relates to people just trying to find where their right spot is. I think the Democrats do need to fight a little tougher. And when I say fight a little tougher, I think we lost this fight. All right. But we didn't lose the whole battle yet. You see what I mean? The war is still at. And what I mean by that is that at some point, Democrats are going to get back into a position of power. And I'm hoping that they look at what happened during this process and saw what they were capable of doing and utilize that for the power of good. You see what I mean? Because a lot of what the Democrats consider good, wasn't, you didn't really use your power as much as you could have.
But I think that also goes to what we mentioned earlier, is we are generalizing the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
And in generalizing Democrats, you're putting them in one main category. And I understand that because this is, Democrats supposed to be who's fighting for us, Republicans, or I should say these parties, the political parties, are fighting with these certain principles in mind. Mm-hmm. But what we have to understand is that the Democrats are made up of people. Mm-hmm. And these people still have different values and different morals and different beliefs underneath this Democratic umbrella.
Right.
And so in that, you've got a few Democrats that are speaking out, that are fighting. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have the monolithic whole, the mass, this is what's happening. So I want to be careful of not generalizing Democrats as a whole in terms of fighting, mm-hmm. because there are some that are trying to fight where there are others, because here's the other thing, and this is what people feel, there are many Democrats, I'm sure, if I sat down and did some interviews, have some of the same similarities and views as the Republicans over here. And then there are also, and I won't say any names on public radio, mm-hmm. of folks that I know that switch parties just to get votes.
Okay. That's correct.
So their premises of what they stand behind,
that's correct,
are in support mm-hmm. of this party, mm-hmm. but I'm going to switch because I'm in the community and I need the votes of this community mm-hmm. so that I can get elected.
And you know who do more of that than anybody? And this is what's crazy. Judges.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was talking about.
Yeah. Judges do.
Sorry, y'all. I didn't mean to answer that question with a mouthful of smoothie in my mouth.
But judges are the ones.
Yep.
They're the ones who do it. The judge will switch party in a heartbeat to get elected. And you putting that person in a position where their thoughts and their whole theories of how they believe, you believe is one way, and they'll come in there saying that, and then you wonder how come they get in office and they putting everybody in jail. Mm-hmm. They become the hanging judge. They become this and they get that because of that exact thing right there. And they get away with that time and time again.
Because again, what is it? And I can't remember who said this, but people being inherently evil. Are people, mm-hmm. that big question, mm-hmm. are people inherently evil? And I think, I'm not going to say people are inherently evil, but what I will say is that many people are very self-motivated. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's about me getting ahead and not about how my work impacts others. And speaking about a judge, I remember a judge said to me, and I knew that they were Republican before. Mm-hmm. And they came to me and asked me was I voting for them in this election or in the previous election. And they were now Democrats. Now, y'all know, y'all learned me for the last couple of months. I'm going to ask certain questions. Right. So for my first question was, what is your take on police abuse of power in the criminal justice system? Mm-hmm. And then I started talking about the Black community, talk about homelessness and your take on drugs within mm-hmm. the community and what happens mm-hmm. with that. Now, did any of the answers please me? Of course not. Mm-hmm. They didn't. Mm-hmm. Did I vote for this person? No, of course not. Mm-hmm. Because I knew that you had switched specifically
just for that.
Mm-hmm. And but now what I did ask, because I said, well, since you and your wife now have different political opinions, how's the household?
Wow. They get along just fine.
Yeah, because he going home and having the same conversation that he had with her.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. They get along just fine. All right, I'm going to talk about this Barack Obama. So Barack Obama, that was one of the things he said. But during his interview, he had an interview with him and First Lady. They sat around and they talked about their relationship. Everybody wanted to put their divorce rumors behind them, that they're not getting a divorce. They're happily married and going to be together. But the thing that I wanted to talk, Barack Obama has been catching heat lately for a few things he said along as it relates to Black men and dealing with Black men. Last year, during the presidential elections, he had took a swipe, and I was with him on this one, where he talked about African-American men and young men needing to really step it up this election, and just his thoughts on that and how he felt it was in our communities, how young African-American males are putting themselves at danger by some of the things they're doing, and kind of need them to step it up and be bigger role models in their community, and challenge other men and others to help get behind that effort. And I was with him on that. Some people kind of felt he was preaching to the choir because these were young men who were doing that, and that message should have been that. So he took a bunch of slack from that as well. But thing that I wanted to talk to him about is he had mentioned during that interview, he was talking about young men and masculinity and that kind of thing. And he mentioned the fact that he said he had a college professor that he was dealing with when he was going through college, who was a gay man. And he felt that going through that process that he learned quite a bit from this gentleman who was able to teach him things. And he felt that every African American, every African American male should have a gay male role model in their life to be able to help guide them. That's not particularly words he used. I want to try to get that straight.
Yeah.
Let me get it straight. So
let's get, because I listened to this whole podcast, and this is always my complaint of what happens with media.
You would need a person or a friend or group so that you will have a boy or gay, non-binary that will help guide them along. So what he was saying is that in the event that you did have a son or a daughter who was,
but let's go back though, Ken.
Right,
let's go back. Let's put this in context, because this is what the media also did. Okay. And I read the notes from this morning, but I listened to this podcast. And so it's very important to put it in context, because this is what tends to happen is stuff comes out of context and it's completely misconstrued as to what the meaning behind it. So first we got to start with, this was a podcast between Michelle Obama and her brother, the IMO podcast that they do. Barack Obama was a special guest on the podcast. And so people were been waiting for, of course, Michelle Obama to have her husband on the podcast with her and her brother. There was a caller, Emma. Emma called in, and this question was about parenting and how do you raise or develop emotionally intelligent young men when you are parenting. And so this podcast went on. This segment, first President Obama and them, they started talking about parenting and some of the things, because I took notes on this once I saw this.
Can I ask real quick what made Emma ask this question, seeming that Michelle and Obama have two daughters?
Well, the brother has two sons.
Okay.
So the brother has sons.
Thank you.
And so the question wasn't to President Obama. The question was to the podcast, which is hosted by Michelle and her brother.
And
her brother has, I think, but see, this is the thing. This is what I mean by taking things out of context when we report it. And we have an obligation as journalists, and I will say that since I did do broadcasting, we have an obligation to tell the entire story. Do I always know the entire story? Of course not. I don't. But in this particular case, I did listen to the entire podcast. This segment, and so what they're talking about was what it meant to parent, and how do you parent boys, and specifically creating emotionally intelligent. And so they started with their own experiences and what that was like growing up. Barack shared about President Obama, former President Obama, shared, like to say Barack, like he my boy, shared that his experience with his dad and his dad not really being the father there. And then Craig shared his experience with his dad. And so they talked about a starting point, having the right partner, is that when you first, who's your partner that you actually having kids with? And so they started with having partner. And then they talked about how the fact that you're not raising children, you're raising adults. And so what does it mean to raise adults? And so then President Obama started talking about community and what it meant to have community specifically for boys. And he said one of the things that helped him was the community that surrounded him of other men, and those men who had differences. He even talked about going around Michelle's family and one of and the men that surrounded her family, and the different types, from engineers to jitney drivers to this person to that person. And then he shared the example of that when he talking about his own community, is that when he was in college, he had a gay professor, and this particular professor helped him to understand some of the stupid things and ignorant things he would say about the community. And having that type of person in his circle was what helped him to grow and to develop. And then he also shared is that with the comment that you're talking about, is that men need community, and they need everyone within that community. And specifically use an example of his professor of how it helped him to deal with understanding gay, non-binary. And if you have people like that in your community, or people who identify as LGBTQ within your community as young boys, then, or the parents, then it will help you to deal that if your son comes home and say that I'm non-binary or I'm gay, you now know how to deal with it because it's already been in your community. See how that is much deeper than what that quote.
Than my quote? No, listen.
Than that 2-line quote that you. But you know what? That was in the article.
That was in the article.
So that was what was reported.
And honestly, the only point that I was making out of that, which I wanted to get back into, which it has to deal with that masculinity thing, was that I just didn't think it was true. I just didn't necessarily believe it's true.
Believe what is true?
That you need to have someone gay, male in your life to be able to teach you how to be more sensitive or be able to deal with situations.
I don't think he was putting in context of being able to teach you how to be more sensitive to that.
No,
not to
sensitivity piece, but I just didn't think it was necessarily meant. I don't think you needed to necessarily have to be gay to do that. That's what I'm saying.
Well, there's a difference between teaching. So let me say this. There's a difference between now we got to back up too. I'm going to say this. I'm going to say two things. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between teaching emotional intelligence and what that is for anyone. Right. There's all kind of books that talks about emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. And specifically when we're talking about masculinity, is that, and generationally, depending on what your age is, and I shared this before, is that men who are pretty much 45 and older, they're not, Black men are not that friendly to the LGBTQ community and have a certain mindset. And again, not all, but some who are not friendly to the LGBT community and have a mindset of not wanting to engage, period. Okay. And then they have children, or you have the conversations about what if your child comes home and they say that they're gay? Oh, they ain't staying in my house. They getting out of my house. They ain't gonna be here. They ain't gonna be there. And I think, and that was what that comment was from President Obama. Right. Was like, if you are exposed, then you have a different perception with the experience, and you're able to have these conversations and be more understanding with your child if your child comes home with this. Not saying that you need someone in your community to create emotional intelligence. Right. And so I think there's a difference
and
between,
maybe that's the way I was taking it. And I was trying to really,
that's why the podcast was 1 hour and 30 minutes.
Geez.
Compared to one line that came out of the podcast.
It's like, come on, man. Really? Is that where we at? But to where we are now with society, and back to me starting out this podcast about communication. All right. And to go back to where you started out, our last conversation was on assimilating. All right. Is that now that the way you just mentioned, the age difference and the gaps and how our times are changing, that's an assimilation of a community that we have to now assimilate to, because before, the way it was dealt with was not to talk about it. But I
don't think we have to assimilate to any community. There's a difference between assimilating and understanding.
What's the difference?
The difference is Ken, did you see? You didn't listen. You a prime example. I did all of that talking and teaching last time.
People have selective listening skills.
What's the difference?
Assimilation is losing your identity to... assimilation is to lose your identity, to absorb someone else's identity, someone else's culture, mindset.
Well, isn't that a form of assimilating, though?
Understanding is different than assimilation, because just because I'm around gay people, I'm not gay. I'm not going to become gay because I'm around gay people.
No, you just told me that but the community should maybe consider, right?
No, that's not what I said. See,
I'm talking about Obama. I ain't talking about you.
See, communication.
No, I ain't talking about you. I'm talking about in his statement itself.
He's saying that you should have someone around you from the community in turn. He said in terms of understanding. It wasn't in terms of assimilation. He's not saying have somebody around you so that you can be gay.
No. But what he said was that you could probably gain a better understanding.
But you can. Right? How do you learn about?
Isn't that a form of assimilation?
No. How do you learn about somebody else if they're not around you?
I get that. my point is assimilating.
No, that's not assimilation.
I believe it's a form of assimilation.
Tell me why you think it's in a form of assimilation.
Because to assimilate is to actually, as we talked about, go into and become something, right? That the community, you accepting to be a part of that community. And to assimilate the fact that you say that this conversation is something you should consider having, is something that normally didn't happen in our community as African Americans, that now we're going to start changing it. Barack said you might want to consider doing that. That's a form of assimilating.
It's not assimilating. You have the choice.
Oh, you want to call it code switching?
No, because
it got to be one of the other.
It does not. There's a difference between, I think you're missing, and this is what I said about that clip. I need you to go listen to the whole podcast.
No, I get
and
what
that's the difference.
Let me clear up on the Obama thing. I totally get what he was saying. I was just messing with you. I understand what he meant by all of that. But only part that we're talking about now is when we get to this thing in our community where we're now saying that this is something you may want to consider doing. I looked at that as a form of now saying that at one point the community, it wasn't a form of thing that we did. That, as you say, not saying whether it was good or bad, it wasn't. But now, if we're considering doing that, it's a form of assimilation.
But I don't.
And it's assimilating to whether you agree with homosexuality or whatever it is. You assimilate. You gotta
because
be.
You don't have to
code switch.
You don't have to agree with things to have to understand. But if you don't learn, you won't gain an understanding. And so if you're not exposed to certain things,
I agree with that.
That's what he's saying, is that when you have people who are around you who are different from you, you can gain an understanding.
Right.
And I say that too. And I'll tell anybody, I learned about the LGBTQ community from my students.
Right.
Is that I have students who come to me and talk to me all the time. Now, many things about anything when it comes to the students, whether it's LGBT or anything, but when it comes to their sexual engagement, very often I don't want to hear these things. But for some reason, they feel my office is a comfortable space. And I have to sit and listen to all of this stuff. And I had to learn to be understanding to that's their lived experience. It's not mine, but it's theirs. But if I'm going to be a great educator, I got to be able to understand and relate to my students. So how do I do that? By learning and by exposing myself to them, not by assimilating, because I'm not changing my identity.
I understand.
But I can now, okay. All right. Well, I don't know if I agree with that aspect right there, but if that's what you doing, you go and engage. And I won't say it because we're on public radio for some of the things that were shared with me.
I understand.
But that's what the difference between assimilation and understanding. And I say this, we became more of an understanding culture and community in general, we probably wouldn't have as much conflict as we do.
Well, it would definitely help for, like you say, better understanding of people can get it. Because, again, I want to put this disclaimer out. I have no problems with none of that stuff that happened. This is just a conversation. I wanted to have it with you because when I was talking with people, and I talked to a few people over the weekend, so it wasn't like I just thought this up. No, I bounced it off a few people. And trust me, everybody said, don't have the conversation, kid.
Why?
Because they said they didn't think it would have been a balanced conversation. I believe I wanted to have the conversation with you because of understanding. And to the point of, like I said, sometimes when we started off, we communicate and just be talking. So you gave me a better perspective of all of this. And that's why we do this radio show. So for the folks out there who was probably thinking the same thing, I was thinking, what the heck is he talking about? Where are we going with this? This is why we have these conversations. And again, don't be trying to cancel me. I ain't got nothing to deal with that. It was just a conversation.
It was just a conversation.
It was a conversation, y'all.
And a conversation.
And we're going to have tough conversations on this show because that's what we hear.
Right. And I think it's also a conversation of really understanding assimilation versus understanding.
That's correct.
And I'll use this really quickly, is he used that. But when we think about when we're as parents, and I'm not a parent, so I'm speaking hypothetically, but when we think about as parenting and exposing us as parents so that we can be more understanding to our children. It's just like me as a woman, having men in my circle who are friends, because then I've got a different understanding of the men in the circle versus my circle being all women.
That's correct.
And so it's that same ideology. Yes. What was the song? Escape song. All we need is understanding.
That's it. I'm just a little hypersensitive when it comes to this masculinity thing, man.
I know. That's what I told you, because you over 45.
I'm on this I'm this alpha male, man. This alpha male, man. Yeah, I'm over 45. We alpha male.
I mean, generationally,
we alpha male.
Yeah, generationally, and having these conversations, you can always tell. And I joke all the time having these conversations.
Say, oh my God, you probably read the notes on this. It was like, oh my God.
I was like, I said, I know where this is going right now. When I read today's show outline, I said, I know where this is going. But again, that goes back to the beginning of the conversation, is that when we talk about generationally, what happens and how do we close the gaps and communicate and share these oral narratives and these stories so that we can all have understanding of each other.
Dr. Burton, I really appreciate you being on the show, help bringing all these understandings and things over to us, because if it was just me, y'all know what y'all would have been doing. So here we go. We got Dr. Burton in the house. Appreciate you being on as always.
Of
Unicorn,
course.
Thanks for your help. DJ True, couldn't do it without you. And here we go. Till next week, we'll talk to everybody. Have a good and safe weekend. Peace.
Cleveland, this is your show, your topics, and your voice. Join in for What's on Your Mind Tuesday. 95.9 FM WOVU. Call in or comment on social media. Let's make this conversation a comment, stream it live. WOVU 95 FM, WOVU.org, and hit us up on social media. Let's go.
Up next is a moment of news with Trey Modlin, WOVU's news director,
What's up,
right
Cleveland?
here on
It's time to turn
95.9
up the
FM.
conversation. Tune in
Thank
to
you,
the
Uni.
Strategic Moves with
Malcolm-Jamal
Kenn Dowell
Warner
Radio
has
Show.
died at
What's
age
on your mind
54.
Tuesdays? Call in,
According to
comment,
authorities,
and connect
he
on
accidentally
WOVU
drowned yesterday
95
after
FM,
getting pulled by a current into deep
WOVU.org,
waters
and hit us up
while on
social
vacation
media.
with his
Let's go.
family in Costa Rica. Malcolm-Jamal Warner played Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show, starting at age 14
What's
from
up,
1984
Cleveland? It's
through
time to turn up the
1992.
conversation. Tune
He won
in
the
to
Young
Strategic
Artist
Moves
Award
with
3
Kenn Dowell
times
Radio
and
Show.
was nominated
What's on
for
your
an
mind
Emmy Award
Tuesdays?
for
Call
Outstanding
in,
Supporting
comment, and
Actor
connect
in a
on
Comedy
WOVU
Series.
95 FM,
Malcolm-Jamal Warner
WOVU.org,
appeared with Wesley
and hit us
Snipes.
up on